Okay guys, so today I'm going to show you another way of putting a object, in this case we're going to use an image in the background of an element and positioning it correctly. Yesterday I showed you how to use a gradient overlay and then use the border radius to change the shape of it using a radius generator, which gives you some really nice looking blobby looking shapes, and then we showed you how to animate that. Today we're going to show you how to use an image with a mask and put it in behind your block. So we're going to start with looking at a change in my little startup here. So the change is I've turned my container into a grid, two column grid, and I've put a block in the left column, which is what I'm going to work with. So we can see that we're positioning relevant to that block. So this element here, the block, is what we're going to use. So the first thing we've got to do is in that block, we've got to go to the layout. We're going to set the position to relative, and relative means that from this point down in the DOM, any absolutely positioned elements are relative to this element here. So if I set an absolute top left, it's going to put the top left of that. If I put bottom right, it's going to put it at the bottom right of that. So this is the relative container or relative element that we're going for absolutely positioned children. Okay. We're then going to go to the, where is it down here? It's all the way down there. Isolation, set that to isolate. Isolate means this point here, this block, is my lowest Z index for my any children of this block. So anything further down the DOM. So what that means, if I have a absolutely positioned element underneath this and I set it to negative 5 million, it's still going to be on top of that block. So it doesn't go behind this block. And there's a common issue where people would put a, say, color on a section around that there, or a container, and they set a -1 Z index and their object just disappears. And it disappears behind the color of the container or the section because it has a lower stacking order than the natural stacking order of that section or container. So it disappears behind it. Isolation isolate says do not go lower than me for any Z index. So I can set it to any negative number and it will not go behind that particular block. Okay, so that said, I explained that a little bit because it's a common mistake that people make. So what we're going to do now is we're going to stick an image inside that block. And I'm just going to pick an image. I'm going to use my mountains here. There's my mountains there. And we want to go to the style tab. We're going to set the position of our image to be absolute. We're going to set the Z index to be -1. And that sticks it in behind that block. But sometimes the image might be smaller than the block. And what happens is when you do that, it doesn't center at the center of that block. So what we want to do is make sure we're centered. So to do that, we set the image to be the top of 50% and the right of 50%. So basically, if we look at these here, there's our block. There's our block there. There's our image there. You can see the blue line. So the image is sitting 50% from the top of that block and 50% from the right of that block. So it's the top right corner of that image is sitting in the center of that block there. But what we want to do is we want to have the image sitting center of the entire block. So what we have to do now is transform our image. So let's go to the image and go to the transform. On the transform, we're going to say translate the X by 50% and translate the Y by -50%. And we're centered again. So to explain that a little bit clearer, when you're setting the top and right of the image, so if we go to the content here, sorry, the style here, go to our layout tab, we're setting the top and the right of the image. That is relative to the block. Okay, so that's going to stick the corner in the center of that block. When we're transforming the image, we're transforming or translating the image, it's relative to the image. So it's 50% of the image width, 50% of the image height. So they're two different things, and this is a simple way of making sure that anything, whether it's an icon, whether it's an image, whether it's an SVG, whether you can make it center within a container, when it's absolutely positioned. That's the way you would do it. Okay. Now we've got our image there. So let's go back to the content. And the simple way to do this with bricks is select a mask from your mask here. And let's say we select bubbles. All right, so now we've got bubbles that are centered within that block. If you are lucky enough to have automatic themer, you will have this little mask helper icon here. Now that's not a standard built-in bricks feature. This is added by Advanced Themer. And if you click on that, you can actually see your mask. So let's say we want to try that one there. So we're going to use that mask there, or we can try something different. Maybe I like the fire, so let's apply the fire. So we've got a fire shape in the background there. Okay, so that is how you would apply a masked image in the background of a block, and that tracks the block. So if I change that block and I moved it, let's add another block here. If I add another block and I just drag that to the beginning, so now we stuck it on the right hand side, you can see the image track the block because the image is inside the block and it's relative to that container, or the block element I should say. So that is pretty much how you would stick a masked image in the background and keep it controlled as to where you want it to sit. And obviously you can also play around with those settings. So I transformed to the center there. You go to the transform here, and let's say you want it to be a little bit off center. You might go translate X, say 40%. So we want it 40% across, or 30%. So there we go, sitting off to the left. So actually, yeah, we're only transforming that by 30% of the width. Or we could leave that at 50% and not 500%. That's not going to work for us. We can go to the layout. Instead of being 50% from the right, we could make that 40% from the right there, or 60%, 70%. So you can play around with positioning, either by positioning the absolute position of that object, or you can play around with the transform of the object to transform it or translate the X and Y using transform. So yeah, that's it. I will leave it at that. If you like this sort of thing, hit the subscribe, hit the like. The next one I will make will be actually creating a mask using a clip path, which you can then animate if you wish to. So that is going to be the next one. Okay, thanks guys.